Hey, good to have you here for this episode. Today, we're diving into something that's, well, pretty fundamental in microeconomics: externalities and public goods.
Yeah, it's one of those topics that really explains why markets sometimes don't work as smoothly as we'd expect, even under perfect competition. When the actions of producers or consumers affect others, but those effects aren't reflected in prices.
Exactly. So, we're going to unpack what externalities are, how they cause inefficiencies in resource allocation, and then look at some classic solutions like Pigovian taxes and the Coase theorem. It's a bit technical, but we'll keep it accessible for folks with a solid economics background.
Sounds good. Let's start with the basics. Externalities are basically costs or benefits that come from production or consumption activities but affect third parties who aren't part of the transaction. Right?
Right, and importantly, these costs or benefits aren't accounted for in the market price. So the market equilibrium ignores these spillover effects, which leads to inefficient outcomes.
And these externalities can be either positive or negative, and they can arise from production or consumption. For example, a negative production externality would be pollution from a factory that harms others, but the factory doesn't pay for that harm.
And on the flip side, a positive production externality could be something like a beekeeper's bees pollinating nearby crops, benefiting other farmers without compensation.
Then, for consumption externalities, a negative example is smoking in public, where secondhand smoke affects others, health. And a positive one would be vaccination, which reduces disease spread and benefits the community.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that these externalities prevent the market from reaching Pareto optimality even if competition is perfect. So the market fails to maximize social welfare.
That's a key point. Now let's break down the types of externalities a bit more. Starting with production externalities. Negative ones happen when a firm's production imposes costs on others, like air or noise pollution.
And positive production externalities occur when a firm's production benefits others but the firm isn't compensated. Like a company training workers who then move on to other firms, spreading skills around.
Right. And this difference shows up in the marginal social cost versus marginal private cost. For negative externalities, the marginal social cost is higher than the private cost because of the external harm.
Which leads to overproduction, since firms ignore those external costs. Conversely, positive externalities mean the marginal social benefit is higher than the private benefit, causing underproduction, because firms don't capture those external gains.
Exactly, and the same logic applies to consumption externalities. Negative consumption externalities, like passive smoking or obesity increasing public health costs, lead to overconsumption.
While positive consumption externalities, such as education or well-kept gardens increasing neighborhood property values, lead to underconsumption.
So in both production and consumption, externalities distort the market outcome by misaligning private and social costs or benefits.
And this misalignment causes allocative inefficiency. The market price doesn't reflect the full social cost or benefit, which creates deadweight loss.
Speaking of deadweight loss, it's basically the loss of social welfare due to producing too much or too little of a good because of externalities.
Right. And there's a neat way to think about this using the marginal rate of substitution, or MRS, and the marginal rate of technical substitution, MRTS.
Yeah, so the formula goes something like MRS equals MRTS minus the externality term, which is often denoted as GX. That GX captures the external effect of producing or consuming one good on another.
So if GX is negative, meaning a negative externality, the market ends up producing too much of the harmful good. If GX is positive, a positive externality, the market produces too little.
And if there's no externality, GX is zero, and the competitive equilibrium is efficient.
That's a really elegant way to see how externalities shift the balance between what consumers want and what producers supply.
Definitely. Now, to make this more concrete, the partial equilibrium model is a useful tool. It looks at a single market to analyze how externalities affect price and quantity.
Yeah, like the example of notebook paper production. The supply curve is given by P equals M, C equals 2 times Q, where Q is in millions of reams per year.
And the demand curve is P equals 40 minus 8Q. So without considering externalities, you'd find the equilibrium where supply equals demand.
But then, If paper manufacturers dump waste into streams, causing an external marginal cost of 50 cents per ream, the social marginal cost becomes MC plus that external cost,
which shifts the supply curve upward, reducing the socially optimal output below the market equilibrium output.
So ignoring the external cost leads to overproduction and welfare loss.
Exactly, and that's where solutions come in. The classic one is the Pigovian tax, named after Arthur Pigou.
Right. The idea is to tax the activity causing the negative externality by an amount equal to the external marginal cost.
This tax internalizes the externality by raising the private cost to match the social cost, shifting the supply curve up and reducing output to the socially optimal level.
Pigou also proposed subsidies for positive externalities to encourage more production or consumption where social benefits exceed private benefits.
And in a general equilibrium framework, the Pigovian tax adjusts the marginal rate of substitution to account for the externality, so mater S equals MRTS, minus the externality term, adjusted by the tax.
It's a neat theoretical solution, but in practice, setting the right tax level can be tricky.
True. Now, the other major approach is the Coase theorem, from Ronald Coase.
Yeah, this one is fascinating because it suggests that if property rights are clearly defined and bargaining costs are low, private parties can negotiate to solve externality problems without government intervention.
So it doesn't matter who holds the property rights, the polluter or the affected party, as long as they can bargain costlessly, they'll reach an efficient outcome.
The classic example is Bart, who owns a factory polluting a river, and Lisa, who fishes in that river.
If Bart has the rights to pollute, Lisa can pay Bart to reduce pollution. If Lisa has the rights, Bart can pay Lisa for permission to pollute.
The key is that the bargaining leads to a mutually beneficial agreement that internalizes the externality.
But this relies on two important assumptions: low bargaining costs and clear property rights.
Right. If transaction costs are high or rights are ambiguous, the Coase theorem doesn't hold up well.
Also, while the outcome is efficient, the distribution of property rights affects who gains bargaining power and how profits are shared.
So it's a powerful insight, but with practical limitations.
Exactly. So to wrap up, externalities are a fundamental cause of market failure, leading to inefficient resource allocation.
And understanding the difference between production and consumption externalities, as well as positive and negative ones, is crucial.
The concepts of marginal social cost and marginal social benefit help us see where markets go wrong.
And Pigovian taxes and the Coase theorem offer two distinct but complementary approaches to correcting these failures.
Hopefully, this gives listeners a solid foundation to think about real-world issues like pollution regulation, vaccination policies, or property rights disputes.
Yeah, it's all about designing effective public policy and economic regulation that account for these spillover effects.
Well, that was a good deep dive. Thanks for the chat.
Likewise. Until next time.